A portion of this video is sponsored by Growatt. I'm not gonna say anything. I don't really need to say anything. Look at those TVs. You know what time it is. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and welcome to the QD OLED battle, the Samsung S95B versus the Sony A95K. Now, I reckon you may have already seen some videos and articles pitting these two TVs together, but I'm gonna do what I do and try to bring a little something different to the table. I think you're gonna like this. Yes, we are going to talk about picture quality, but making the decision between these two TVs involves so much more than just comparing picture quality, or at least it should, because if this was just a picture quality battle, I'd be like, cool, the Sony A95K wins. Peace out, I'm gonna go smash a burrito. And that might not come as much of a surprise because the A95K won the Value Electronics TV shootout, pretty handily by the way, and besides, just about everyone who has reviewed the Sony A95K or even just seen it knows it is the Whoops, sorry kids. Hey, it's a really special TV, but that doesn't mean you should buy it. Like I said, there's more to consider, and we're gonna consider all the things so that by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which TV you will or might buy. Before we jump into it, I just wanna say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the support. It means everything to me. I've been having a great time chatting with you in the comment section, and I'm gonna do even more of that over the next few months, which is a great reminder to hop in the comment section and say something uplifting, please. And if you're new around here, we'd appreciate any clicks of support you feel moved to offer. Oh, also folks, I don't want to have to waste time doing this, but watch out for scammers in the comments. We will never tell you that you've won a prize and then try to get you to click a Telegram link, okay? Those are scams, and there's not a lot YouTubers like us can do about it, though we do try. But with that said, guys, we're getting close to 1 million subs, just 17.5K more, and I've got a giveaway cooked up, so stoked. Here we go. I'm gonna break this versus down into design, functional features, fun features, picture quality, price, and in the end, well, you get it. Now, I suppose you could skip around, but I would encourage you to take this journey with me because I think it'll make the takeaway that much more valuable. So starting with design, the most obvious difference to point to is the stand. This only means something if you're gonna stand mount the TV, but if you are, take a look at the Samsung S95B. It's got a central pedestal stand that's stable enough, allows a little room for a slim soundbar. Perhaps most importantly, is going to fit on just about any media stand you might have, thanks to its small footprint. By comparison, the Sony A95K demands a fairly big media stand like our gorgeous BDI corridor here. Its pedestal, if you want to call it that, runs the entire width of the TV and runs fairly deep, if you set it up this way. You can also have the pedestal oriented toward the front of the TV so the TV itself can sit flush against a wall if you like. Now, if you're wall mounting, suddenly the visual differences between the two TVs are much more subtle. Both of them have super thin display panels and both have a bit of a bump out on the back. The Sony's bump out takes up more real estate on the back surface, but the depth of the bump out between the two is the same. So even with the tightest of wall mounts, you'll have a little bit of a gap from the wall. From the front, they are both attractive TVs, though I'll point out that the Sony has a strip down toward the bottom that's a bit larger than the strip on the Samsung. Which do I personally like better? The Sony. It's less practical, so I think the Samsung is the better design for most folks, but I just like the Sony sort of modernist approach. It's a personal preference. Now let's talk about functional features. We'll start with the remote. I think a lot of folks overlook the fact that this remote, you interact with it every time you want to watch TV. It has a huge influence on how much you enjoy interacting with your TV, right? So here's the deal. What I like about the Samsung remote is that you'll never have to replace the batteries, and you probably won't ever have to charge it either. That's because it can charge via solar on the back, and it charges with radio waves already floating around in your home. No, I'm not kidding. It really does. There's a USB-C port on the bottom if you need to charge it, but I don't think that you will. I like that it's slim to a point. The slimmer it is, the easier it is to lose in the couch or chair cushions. I like that it's simple, but again, to a point. Sometimes I want a dedicated button to get straight to, let's say, settings. And this remote relies a bit more on the TV's on-screen interface to help you get where you want to go. I also wish it was backlit, but really, it's a great forward-thinking remote. I prefer the Sony remote though. For one thing, it's backlit. For another, it's got a few dedicated buttons that I want. Also, it feels better in the hand. And perhaps most of all, Sony has a remote finder feature, and the little alarm on this thing is plenty loud to help you find it. Now let's talk about HDMI inputs. The Samsung S95B supports HDMI 2.1 bandwidth on all 4 ports, while the Sony has 2 high bandwidth ports, and one of them is the eARC port. Now look, think very carefully about whether this is really a big deal to you or not. Do you have enough gear that supports 4K, 120Hz, HDR, VRR output to need more than 2 HDMI 2.1 ports? Like, set aside the argument that if you pay so much for a TV, then you should get all of the latest stuff everywhere, and consider your actual needs. If the answer is yes, you need 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, and that's more important than anything else, well then I guess you're done with this video. I will, however, point out that there are AV receivers that offer multiple HDMI 2.1 ports and can make accommodating lots of high-end gear a bit easier. Next, I want to point to the Smart TV OS. With the S95B, you get Samsung's Tizen, and with the A95K, you get Google TV running on Android 12. Now, I am personally a fan of Google TV. I have a Samsung TV at home, and I plugged into it a Chromecast. Samsung's Tizen is fine. It's perfectly fine most of the time. But for daily use, Google TV just gets my vote. In the end, both have the apps you need, and those apps perform well on both TVs. There is some HDR specific stuff to talk about, but that's coming up in a minute. Now on to sound quality. Here, the Sony A95K is the clear winner, but that's because the A95K's onboard sound quality is just insanely good. The Samsung S95B on its own sounds very good as well. I don't think anyone will be disappointed with how the S95B sounds. It's just that the A95K, with its beefy subwoofer output and the fact that the screen is the speaker system, it can't be matched. I think it's the best sounding TV on the market. Now, both TVs have features that let them play nicely with outboard audio systems. Samsung offers Q Symphony sound, which lets the TV add height and presence to the presentation when combined with a Samsung soundbar. Meanwhile, the Sony A95K can act as the center channel with a system like the Sony HT-A9 or with pretty much any AV receiver. You just run the center channel speaker wire into the back. All in all, for sound, the Sony A95K wins, but the Samsung is no slouch. Now let's talk about some features that I would consider non-essentials, but nice add-ons nonetheless. On the Samsung side, there are 3 things I feel are worth mentioning. The first is Samsung Channels, which is really just free internet TV, but presented as a list of channels you can flip through. The nice thing here, if this appeals to you, is that you don't have to be concerned about whether it comes from Tubi or Pluto or whatever. It's just content you can watch. Simple. And then there's Samsung's ambient mode, which converts the TV into an art display. Some works are free, but there's something like 2,000 works total available if you want to buy some. Also, even though it isn't as convincing as Samsung's The Frame, it really is about just looking like art, whereas with the Sony, you get Google TV screensavers, which always have text at the bottom. Finally, Samsung appeals to gamers with a gaming dashboard, which is not something you get with the Sony right now. On the Sony side, well, I guess there are like 2 things worth mentioning. One of them is Bravia Core, which offers some of the highest fidelity video and audio that you can stream right now. If you don't have a 4K Blu-ray player, this is about as good as it gets for showing off your TV. Now, it's mostly Sony Pictures content, but there are some winners in there. Also, it's worth pointing out that Sony is one of the last brands out there putting out a 4K Blu-ray player, so if you like seamless integration, Sony has that. Then there's the Bravia Cam. This comes in the box with the TV, and the port for it is integrated right in the back, so you don't have to run a USB cable for it. It can tell you if you're sitting too close to the TV, act as a video cam, and optimize the picture quality in the room, presumably better than the built-in sensor that you find on most TVs out there. I'll be honest, I haven't played much with this thing. I'm just mentioning it in case it sounds entertaining to you. Hey, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, the Growatt Infinity 1500 Portable Power Station. The Growatt Infinity 1500 has a long list of features you'll love, but I want to hone in on one thing it does better than most. Something folks often overlook when considering a portable power station, and that is fast recharging. Plugged into a wall outlet, the Growatt Infinity 1500 can charge from 0 to 80% in just 1 hour. In 2 hours, 100% charge. Now that's impressive on its own, but check this out. The Growatt Infinity 1500 supports up to 800 watts of solar power and can fully charge from 0 to 100% in under 2.5 hours. That's incredible. Forget all-day trickle charging. The Growatt Infinity 1500 is ready to deliver faster. And you'll love what it delivers. A tremendous 1.5 kilowatt hours of power in a compact package you can control, monitor, and update with Growatt's Smart app. It peaks at 2,000 1000 watts, so bring your water kettle, microwave, espresso maker. It powers high draw devices with ease. With 4 AC outlets, a CARB port, 2 USB-C, 4 USB-A, and a wireless charging pad up top, connections abound. One hub charges all your devices and recharges lightning fast. Find a link to the Growatt Infinity 1500 down below to get the best price, and thanks again to Growatt for sponsoring this video. And now, my friends, it's time to talk about picture quality. And here is where I'm going to take a different approach than you may have seen before. Now, I already stated at the top of this video that I think that the A95K has better picture quality, but what I didn't talk about was the razor-thin margins that exist between these two TVs. When it comes to picture quality performance, it's not like we're comparing a Lexus to a Toyota, okay? It's more like comparing a McLaren to a Bugatti. Both are the TV equivalent of a supercar. Both offer excellent handling and acceleration. One just edges out the other by just a tiny little bit in a couple of areas. In most measurable areas, these TVs are neck and neck. Color accuracy, color volume, off-angle performance, glare reduction, motion resolution. I could go on and on. Like I said, in most areas, neck and neck. The only areas where these TVs seem to diverge is how they handle brightness and shadow detail. Now, by measurements alone, and again, this comes down to how you measure, the Samsung would appear to offer slightly brighter highlights in some cases, while it also tends to crush blacks just the tiniest bit versus the Sony. But in side-by-side comparisons, whether watching SDR or HDR10 content, for me, the Sony appears to be brighter. Its HDR pops just a little bit more. The subjective perceptual evaluation deviates a bit from the objective, and that's not the first time this has happened. But there is one area in which these TVs will diverge a bit more significantly, and that's anytime it comes down to watching content in Dolby Vision versus HDR10. Take Black Panther on Disney Plus, for example. It will be in Dolby Vision on the Sony because the Sony supports it, and it will be in HDR10 on the Samsung because it doesn't support Dolby Vision. And the title is not available yet in HDR10 Plus, so that's not an option. Here, the Sony is clearly brighter and a bit more vibrant. The APL is up a bit, and the highlights are a bit punchier too. Now, this will vary a bit depending on the content, but what I hope to point out here is that this is less a Samsung versus Sony performance consideration and more of an HDR10 versus Dolby Vision consideration. With Sony, you will get Dolby Vision, and with Samsung, you will not. Whether you prefer Dolby Vision or think Dolby Vision offers a real benefit a high percentage of the time is up to you. It just is what it is. But understand that this perspective is with the benefit of having the two TVs side by side, so we can scrutinize. I would challenge anyone who claims to sit in front of the Samsung S95B and think they're missing out on something based on what they witness coming off the screen. It's only with the benefit of a direct comparison that we can see any differences at all, and those differences are few and far between. I will say that the Samsung TV in game mode is considerably brighter than the Sony from our tests. That just seems to be the way that the Samsung likes to handle its gaming mode. Whether you prefer that look, again, up to you. Now, before I get to the conclusion here, I want to address a few questions some viewers left for me when I teased this video. For instance, question: what are the differences in potential for burn-in between the two TVs? Answer: I don't know. I'm not super concerned about either one of them burning in based on my personal use style. Like, not at all. And nothing but a long-term torture test is going to offer concrete conclusions there. I don't feel like the Samsung is at higher risk than the Sony or vice versa, heat sink or no heat sink. I think it matters more what your viewing habits are than anything else. I mean, do you put ESPN on every day and leave it on that channel for hours on end, never turning it off, day after day, week after week, month after month? Then I probably wouldn't get either one of these TVs. And I'm just gonna leave the burn-in thing there. What about auto brightness limiter or ABL? Any meaningful differences there? Look, side by side here, both TVs maxed out. The Samsung's in movie mode, though it's about the same in filmmaker mode, and the Sony is in custom mode, though cinema produces the same results. Look at the kitty. I've got no dog in this fight. Let's let kitty hang out here for a bit. Well, at least until the Samsung screensaver comes on. Now, if we let this continue, after several minutes, the Sony will start to dim down. So no screensaver, but it will start dimming. after several minutes. Now, hockey time, mostly white on the screen. Same deal, same settings, same frame, same result, both essentially the same for way longer than you'll actually have this image on the screen in real life with real content. Look, I don't know about you, but I don't watch content on pause. I don't want the same image on full blast for more than 5 or 10 seconds, much less 60 or more seconds, certainly not for as long as it's going to take me to get through this paragraph. What I'm getting at is this. I did not experience any meaningful degradation in viewing brightness while watching these two TVs side by side. Not for real content, and as I mentioned before, for SDR and HDR10, the brightness was neck and neck. ABL was never a factor for real viewing for me. So now comes the inevitable mention of price. Earlier, I remarked that in terms of performance, comparing these TVs was analogous to comparing a Bugatti and a McLaren. But if I were to continue brutalizing such an analogy, I would have to say that when it comes to price, it is like we're comparing a Lexus and a Toyota. One begs a premium, and it delivers a bit for that premium. The question is whether that premium is worth it for you. I suspect that for most folks, the Samsung S95B is the far better choice. It delivers such an incredible experience, and for significantly less than the Sony A95K. I mean, we could be talking about $1,500 worth of difference as I record this. Folks, I can't justify that kind of price difference for the Sony A95K. Is it the best performing TV of 2022? Absolutely, I stand behind that. Is it gonna be my top recommendation? No, and that's because I can't look someone in the eyes and tell them the significant added expense is worth it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, if cost was no object for me, personally, I'd pick the Sony all day, every day, no question. But in this particular battle, I have to call a clear winner. And for me, and most folks I suspect, the Samsung S95B is the smarter pick. And in the end, it was all about the money. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. How do you feel about where I landed with this versus video? You got thoughts? Share them with me down in the comments. Please consider liking and subscribing. I'll see you again soon. And until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.